Okay, we're on. Just a few more people joining. Okay. Okay, welcome for is this the fourth one we've done, I think? So we started Va'era, Mishpatim. This is the fifth one, although I forgot to record one. So Mishpatim, a lot of laws in this, a lot of mitzvahs in this parsha. We're not going to be able to cover all of them, but we'll look at a few more in depth. I mean, there's a few more interesting ones like if there's a sorceress or a witch, she must be put to death, um, which is an interesting idea. The concept of black magic in general, it does exist. Otherwise, the Torah would not prohibit it. Um, and there's various sources that Yoshka used black magic in his little cameo way back when. So Mishpatim starts off very interestingly with the mitzvah of Eved Ivri. Unfortunately, it could be that a Jew stole. He stole, and he's not able to pay back what he stole. So the Beis Din sell him into slavery, meaning they sell him to a family, and the proceeds of the sale is that's the way that the family or the person that was stolen from is that is how the restitution is made. So they get given a slave. Since he can't pay back what he stole, he has to serve instead. And that's for 6 years. And then in the seventh year, he goes free. We always see this idea of six days a week you shall work, and the seventh day you shall rest. So here also, 6 years the slave will work for his master, and in the seventh year he'll go free. Unless there's a jubilee in that time. If the jubilee year comes around every 50 years, then he would go free at that point if it happened to coincide before his 6 years of servitude was completed. It's a very interesting mitzvah because obviously it doesn't apply nowadays. We don't have the jubilee, so all these mitzvahs connected to the jubilee are no longer in practice. But how it worked was, yes, so he was sold to the family that he stole from, but the family had to treat him very well. So let's say they were drinking wine, they would have to make sure that he had wine. If they had fine flour, the bread that they had was of a certain quality, the family had, they had to make sure he also had. They couldn't fob him off with Hovis or something else. It had to be good quality bread, etc. If they had nice beds, they had to make sure that he had just as nice a bed. The expression in the Talmud, it says as follows: Kol hakoine eved ivri kakoine adon la'atzmai. Whoever acquired a Jewish slave, it's really like they acquired a master for themselves because they had to treat them so well. They were like so part of the family. It was almost like a burden. But the whole idea of this rehabilitation that this person stole and in a situation where he can't pay back, we don't throw him in jail. That is not a Jewish concept. As we see, jail doesn't generally rehabilitate people. In fact, it tends to radicalize people, unfortunately, in this country anyway. So rather we place him with a Jewish family and we treat him well, and you can't give him demeaning jobs to do, like you can't get him to wash your feet, or put your shoes on, or any demeaning jobs. If he was a skilled worker, let's say he was an artisan, I don't know, a carpenter, then you would have to give him jobs that he would excel in or that he was good at. You shouldn't then get him to be a chef if that's something that he really wasn't used to. Obviously, there's a bit of leeway, if he was happy to try it out, etc. But generally, we were very concerned about their well-being, and you had to look after them. And also, when they left at the end of this 6 years, you had to give them a leaving present. You have to give them some sheep, some wine, some produce, like a golden handshake type of thing. If he was single when he came into your family, then he would leave single. So just a few more people joining. If he was married, you were allowed to give him a second wife, a Canaanite wife, a non-Jewish woman, could be his, so to speak, second wife. and the children born from that union, they would also be slaves to the family. So in that way, that is how the family or the new master would benefit from having the slave. If he came in as a married man, he already had a Jewish wife. He could have like a second wife, and the children from that marriage, from that union, would then be slaves as well. It's all a little bit foreign to us because, like I said, these mitzvahs haven't applied for a long time. But you had to look after him in a way that if he came in with his family, with his wife and his kids, you had to provide for them as well. You had to make sure that they were all looked after, even though only the man was the one that would actually serve the family and work
Perfect.
for the family. The wife and the kids, you just had to provide for them. Yes,
Hi, good evening. Hello. I'm sorry about my appearance. It looks like I've been bleached in milk powder. I don't know what's going on with my
that's fine. I also need a haircut.
camera. So the definition of slavery in biblical times was the definition that it was someone who worked for you but that wasn't paid. Is that the definition of it? Because clearly you're saying that the slaves were looked after, they were cared for, they were provided for. It sounds like they were treated with respect as well. So is the only really the definition that makes them a slave that they're not actually given recompense in terms of, financial, in terms of money?
Yeah, that's right. They didn't get paid for what they did. They did get a golden handshake at the end. You had to send them off with a nice gift, like a severance payment. Uh, but yeah, board and lodging, that was all sorted. And the main part of this was the rehabilitation as well. Now, the question is why, after we had the Ten Commandments last week, starting this week, we're going through all these laws. The first law you're going to start with is a bit of a Nebuch law. It's a bit of a sad situation. A Jew stole. Also, especially when you take into account that when the Jews left Egypt, they all had lots of money. They had lots of gelt because they took all the Egyptians' gold and silver on the way out. So it wasn't like anyone was poor and would be tempted to steal. But the Torah already from the outset was anticipating, okay, not everyone was going to be so inspired the whole time after leaving Egypt and the Ten Commandments. Things might peter out. It could be one day a Jew will get into a situation where he steals. So even from the outset, we are mindful of those in society that might fall off the edge, might go a little bit off the path. And already we are concerned about how to rehabilitate them, how are we going to get them back into society, how are we going to look after them and make sure that we don't just push away the outcasts. And it's a shame that obviously this idea hasn't spread. And you have sort of community service, you have these ideas of trying and parole officers, etc. But generally, the prison system is very broken, and they're all full, aren't they? So that says enough. Says all you need to know. Um, Also, this idea of if he didn't want to go free at the end of 6 years, and he wanted to stay on as a slave because this was quite it was an option for them because they had their free board and lodging. They enjoyed life as it was. So they would be a strange ceremony where they'd stand next to a door, a lintel, and they would bore a hole through his ear, and he would have like a hole in his ear. And that was a sign that he wanted to stay on as a slave longer than the 6 years. It was seen as not an ideal situation because the same ear that heard on Mount Sinai or heard from God, you shall be my servants, this person decided, actually, I want to be a servant to someone else. So that's one reason through the ear, this ceremony. Another reason is the same ear that heard, you should not steal, although the not stealing in the Ten Commandments is really not kidnapping, but generally the whole Ten Commandments include all the mitzvahs they're hinted to in the Ten Commandments. The same ear that heard, thou shalt not steal, went and stole. So he's obviously not using his ear properly. So again, that's why we bore a hole through his ear. Again, it all sounds a little bit alien to us, but this is how it used to be. If someone wanted to stay on, and based on what we said till now, you understand why a person would want to stay on as a Jewish slave because he had it pretty cushy. Okay, something else very strange. This, by the way, being sold into slavery. Would also be the case if someone was so destitute that they had no money. They also had this option of, so to speak, selling themselves to then go work for a family for the 6 years, and then in the seventh year go free. It was also an option for someone destitute. Now, this isn't very politically correct. nowadays, but of a father, a Jewish family. They were very poor. The father's trying to think of ways to make money. He was allowed to send his daughter. This is sort of the next mitzvah in the parsha. Send his daughter, sell his daughter, so to speak, to work as a maidservant for another family. And the money that he would make from selling his daughter, so to speak, to serve another family for 6 years, that would help him financially. And the family that this girl, his daughter, would go to work for, ideally, she would then marry her new master or the master's son, depending on what was more appropriate. Um, and then both parties benefit. The father had no money, so he gets money from the sale. The daughter also now has a husband, and she will be provided for as well. So on the surface, it sounds a little bit like, what is this? You're just getting rid of your daughter to get some cash, but actually, it benefits both sides. If for whatever reason the new master didn't want to marry this girl and he didn't think it was a good shidduch for his son either, then she would be redeemed either because her father, the original father, made some money. He was encouraged to redeem her back. Or they would deduct the number of years that she would already served. So let's say she'd served 2 of the 6 years. So now to redeem her, you would calculate how many years left she had to work, and you would pay sort of a cash advance, so she wouldn't have to serve the last 4 years, and then she would be redeemed. So again, another interesting mitzvah that we don't have nowadays. Okay, moving on. We have all the laws of damages in this week's parsha. So if you drive into someone's car or your ox gores another ox, as it was in the good old days, what do you have to pay? So if you damage a person, there are 5 general things you have to pay for. You have to pay for the physical injury. How that was calculated was, let's say you have a person, you would, in the old days when they would sell slaves in the market, you would figure out how much that person would be valued if they were a slave. This is just to find out the monetary amount that you owe a person once you've injured them. So let's say you broke their arm or you bruised them up. So a bruise recovers, you recover from a bruise, but if you break someone's arm or some other permanent damage, then obviously you're going to have to, their value, if they were a slave, would be deducted, let's say by £100 or a few £100 or a few £1,000s. So the amount that they are now worth less than they would have been prior to the injury, you have to pay that. That's called nezek. Then you have to pay tsar, which is the pain. So how much pain you inflicted. Again, this is all discussed in the Talmud at length. It depends how much of an area you damaged. Was it permanent damage, temporary damage, etc. Ripoy was the next thing. You'd have to pay the doctor's bills. So they needed a physician and they needed medical treatment. You'd have to pay for that. You'd also have to pay for their unemployment because now they can't work if they're injured or whatever work they were doing before. They can't go straight back to work. Then you have to pay for however long they're out of work for. And boshes, you have to pay for the embarrassment. So depending, obviously, all these things are on the sliding scale. So if a person is very dignified or let's say of nobility, and they were injured or slapped around the face by, so to speak, a peasant, someone that was, a no good Nick, then the embarrassment is a lot worse because they've been embarrassed. Someone very important has been embarrassed by someone that is, riffraff, so to speak. So they that would be worse. But if they had like a falling out with a contemporary, then the embarrassment wouldn't be as bad. So all these 5 types of damages you would have to pay. Now, then we move on to a thief, an actual thief. There's 2 types of thieves: a ganaf and a gazlan. A ganaf is someone that steals at night or when he thinks you're out. Yeah, he's trying not to get caught. And then you have a gazlan, someone that will just rob you, daylight robbery. They don't care. Brazen. So it's interesting that if you steal in secret and then you're found to be with the stolen object, you have to pay back what you stole, and you have to pay back as a fine the equivalent or monetary value again. So you're basically paying back double. But if you rob someone in broad daylight, you actually only have to pay back what you stole. You don't get a fine on top of that. What's the logic behind that? Surely it's worse. You don't even care. You just go up to someone in the middle of the street in the middle of the day, and it's a bit like when people steal these the cats from the car, the catalytic converters. People just do it in the middle of the day. They don't care. But the idea of someone that does it in broad daylight is less of a problem because they don't care about you and they don't care about God either. Yeah, they don't care about anyone. Whereas someone that steals at night or is trying to be secretive, he cares about getting caught. So he cares about people, but he doesn't care about God. So he cares more about someone catching him, an actual person catching him, than God seeing him. God, yeah, he knows God's watching, but that's fine. That doesn't bother him. But he's worried about people. So he's placing the fear of people above the fear of heaven. And because of that, we fine him double. You've got to pay back what you stole, and you're going to get a fine. You've got to pay back again the amount that you stole. Someone stole a sheep or an ox. There's not really an equivalent nowadays, really, but yeah, if you stole someone's sheep or ox and then you sold it or you slaughtered it, so if you stole someone's sheep, you have to pay back 4 times the value of the sheep, and if you stole an ox, you have to pay 5 times the value of an ox. Why more for an ox than a sheep? Because an ox can do work for its master. You can get it to plow, etc. Sheep don't really work for you. And the other reason is because to steal a sheep is very degrading because you have to pick it up and carry it on your shoulders. And that's considered that the Torah already appreciates, or it sort of has a little bit of pity on someone that went to the length of stealing a sheep, saying, Nebuch, you steal a sheep, and you had to carry it around, on your back. Because of that, they'll only make you pay 4 times back, whereas an ox can be easily led away. So we make you pay that little bit more for an ox, 5 times the value of an ox, because you didn't have to degrade yourself when you stole it. Does that make sense? So it's interesting how the Torah sees things from the angle, almost has pity, and looks at the perspective of the ganef, of the thief, which is interesting. Okay. By the way, stealing nowadays, a more practical application would be you invite someone for a meal, but you're hoping they say no. You don't really want them to come. So you sort of give someone an offer, but you don't want them to take it. Or you walk into a shop and you no intention of buying the watch or the jewelry there, but you sort of lead on the owner. I say, oh, can I try on this watch? Oh, it looks so nice. How much does it cost? But you have no intention of buying it. That is sort of leading on the owner, and that's considered Geneva Das, stealing his peace of mind. Yeah. Also, stealing applies to waking someone up from their sleep. You're not allowed to wake people up for no reason. And a child can't wake up their parents unless it's something the parent wants to be woken up for. So, like they're going to miss their flight maybe, or maybe the house is on fire. Then you should obviously wake up your parents. But for anything else, unless it's something that you definitely know the parent would want to be woken up for, you have to leave them sleeping. Famous story with years ago, is told in the Talmud that someone wanted to do a big business deal with this father of this non-Jewish man, and the son refused to wake up his father, even though his father would have made a lot of money from the deal. And then the next year came around, and they happened to have a red heifer in their possession, one of these rare red cows. And the Jewish people wanted to buy it off this family, and eventually they made back the money that they so to speak lost out on the first time round when he didn't want to wake up his father. So when you do the right thing, although there might be a small monetary loss in the short term, you will definitely get it back in the future. I've forgotten the man's name. I'll have to put it on the Nasina Ben. I'm going to go Nasina for now, but I've forgotten his name. But moving on. An interesting case here. If someone has an ox and it galls another ox, so the Torah gives a little bit of leeway. The first few times this happens, we'll say, okay, you only have to pay half of the damages that the ox inflicted. Yeah. I don't know how this would work with insurance. They don't make a difference if it's your first time or 50th time. I guess your insurance keeps going up and up. But If an ox gores another ox, the Torah says the first time, okay, you only have to pay half of what the ox damaged. Second time, also only half. Third time as well. But after three times already, this ox now has a category of a warned animal. It's basically wild, and the owners have to guard it especially well. If it gores again, it goes rogue, then you have to pay full damages at that point. So you get three strikes and then you're out. That's basically how it works. Three strikes, you only have to pay half of the damage, and afterwards full damages. Um, Now, every mitzvah in the Torah has the body of the mitzvah, the laws of it, as codified in the Mishnah and then the Gemara, and then filtered down through into Shulchan Aruch, into Jewish law as we keep nowadays. But every mitzvah also has a spiritual side to it. So this idea of three times you do to apply it to a human, for example, for a moment. So let's say there's a certain sin that a person commits. First time, God, so to speak, says, "Okay, um, you've sinned, but we're not going to hold it against you forever. You can repent and fix this. If you do it a second time, again, a little bit of leeway from God, you can repent and say, I'm not going to do it again. And the third time. But once you've done it three times, or it's already, now you're a habitual offender, and now it's like a mark next to your name. This certain sin, let's say, for example, Lashon Hara, speaking bad of others, which is very hard to avoid, then it's like you are now a habitual offender. You have become a rogue in this area. You are like a wild ox now, if we were comparing it to the animal. You're now a wild ox, and it's now very difficult to, once an ox is wild or certain behavior is ingrained in your psyche, it's very hard to undo it. So the Mishnah and the Torah talks about how do you retrain a wild ox? How do you get it back to sort of behaved or domesticated? Not that an ox can ever really be domesticated. And so to a human also, we can never really say that we are in control of ourselves the whole time, that we'll never sin again. There's always going to be a Yetzer Hara. There's always going to be temptation there. That's always there. It's a case of taming it. So how do you do that? How do you change a wild ox or a certain sin that has become habitual by you to reverse it? So with the ox, it says either you can change the ox's owner, so you sell it to someone else, then the ox reverts to as like it started. It gets a fresh slate. Having a new owner, psychologically for the ox, I don't know how that would work biologically. It calms down, or it has a fresh start. So that's one, changing owner. Or the other example that says in the Mishnah is when children feel safe enough by this ox to come up and give it a little pat, a little tap on the head, or ruffle its hair. Although I'm not sure where the parents are at that time. But so that idea, both of those ideas, again, this is the actual mitzvah and the laws, but you can always apply it on a spiritual level back to us in some level. So changing ownership, that would be like a change of environment. You move to a different place, or you distance yourself from whatever caused you to sin or led up to the sin last time. That would be a little bit like changing ownership, changing your domain. So when you transfer ownership, that's what happens. You move the ox from one courtyard to another, or from one field to another. So it's literally moving over. So you keep track of what led up to a certain sin, and you change that. And the other, with the children patting the ox, is you've managed to work on yourself enough that you've tamed that certain Yetzer Hara, that certain thing that was dragging you down, that you were struggling with, to the point that you've mastered it now. No matter what trigger, you're not going to go back to that behavior from before. So you wouldn't necessarily think an ox scoring another ox, how much damage does it have to pay? Well, you get 3 goes, and after that, it has to pay full damages. Before that, half damages. But every mitzvah, in a way, can be linked back to us in a spiritual sense. I'll give you another example of this. So the Parsha also talks about 4 types of guardians. So if I give you an object to look after. So I can see you, David, on screen. So if I give you my watch to look after and say, please look after this for me. I'm not paying you anything. Please look after it. Do me a favor. Yeah. And then you're looking after it, David, and there happens to be an earthquake, and the watch falls down the cracks and it's gone. So because you were looking after it for nothing, pro bono, you're exempt. It wasn't because you were negligent, it was because there was an earthquake, right? But let's say you decided to leave the watch outside on your patio at night time. That's negligent. Then you would have to pay me back for my watch. Okay. So you're only obligated for negligence if you're looking after it for free. That's called an unpaid guardian. Right. Now let's say I give you the watch and I'm going to pay you now. Say, David, look after my watch. I'm going to pay you £10 a day to look after this watch until I get back to you. Now, if it was stolen from you, then that's a problem. If you weren't looking after it properly, even though you might not have been completely negligent, once there's theft involved, that then you're going to have to pay for that as well.
Rafi, what if the watch was forcefully taken? What if
Oh,
the
very good. I'm glad you
person?
mentioned. Yeah, if it was a load of bandits came and surrounded your house and you're held at gunpoint, then that would be like an earthquake. Yeah, so
Okay,
it would
so
be
so it's
another
something
example of
outside of
that.
your control.
Outside of your control, you're never going to be obligated, unless we have the next case is if you borrow something free of charge, then you take on full responsibility, even if there was armed bandits, earthquake, you name it, out of your control. But because you're borrowing it and you have full benefit, you take on that responsibility. So that is for a borrower. Okay, but if you're a paid guardian, you're only going to have a problem if it's stolen from you or negligence. And finally, there's a fourth category of someone that hires. So let's say you pay me, David, to have my watch for a few days. You've got, I don't know, a nice wedding coming up and you want to wear my fancy Rolex. Yeah. So then again, we're back to only theft. It would be a problem, theft and negligence. Right. So without getting too bogged down in all the categories there, you've got an unpaid guardian, a paid guardian, someone that's a borrower, and someone that's hiring. Okay. Again, these four categories can represent four types of Jews in their service of God. Yeah. You have someone that serves God because they just want to do the right thing. Torah mitzvahs, it's MS, it's true. That's what God wants from us, and we want to bring God's presence down into the world, and we want to elevate this physical world, and our personal reward and will to come and bliss in the next world, that doesn't concern us. Okay, that would be like someone that is an unpaid guardian. We are happy to do the job, we don't want any reward for it. Then the next one down was a paid guardian. Yeah, I'll do Torah mitzvahs, but I want a bit of kesef. I want a bit of reward in the next world. It's sometimes difficult getting up every morning for shachris, or it's sometimes difficult cleaning your whole house for chomets, etc., etc. Whatever whatever mitzvah you might find a bit more difficult, and it's not always straightforward. We have a lot to do. So it's natural, a person might think, I'm going to learn the whole Gemara, the whole Shas, page a day for 7 years. I would like a little bit of reward in the next world. Okay, not a terrible thing. It's fair enough. But already you want a little bit of payment. Yeah, you're not doing it pro bono. I want a bit of payment. That would be like a paid guardian. Then you have a borrower, someone that's really, he just wants everything for himself. He's only interested in what he can get out of this world. But he understands there is a God, so okay, I'll do a few bits here and there just to keep you happy, yeah. And then someone that hires an object, that's somewhere in between. I was trying to link it to an example. Let's say someone wants a lift. Someone asks you for a lift somewhere. And if you're the type of guy, such a nice guy, like, of course, I want to give you a lift, and you're happy to give them a lift, and you don't expect them to reciprocate. And even if they offer, you're like, no, I know I gave you a lift once, but that was out of pure love, etc. Right? That would be an equivalent. Then you have someone that's, yeah, of course, I'm happy to give you a lift, but in the back of your mind, when you need a lift, you are half expecting them to, help you out. There's a little bit of half expecting there. Then someone will ask you, you'll give someone a lift, or they'll only offer you a lift on condition that you will definitely give them a lift when they need a lift. Okay, definitely. Okay, not even a half expecting. It's like, I'll give you a lift, but when I need a lift, I need you to give me a lift. Okay, hopefully you're still holding here with me. And then maybe the final category would be, you take me first, and then I'll give you a lift another time. Just because it'd be rude not to, but I need to make sure I get my benefit in first. That would be like the borrower, yeah? That it's all about what I can get out of it, and then I'll throw God a few mitzvahs. So again, on the surface, this is just about the laws of guardians and their responsibilities in case of negligence, theft. Oiness is something that's beyond your control, like we mentioned, the earthquake, etc. Um, but they all have an equivalent that apply to us as well in our service of God. This also comes that we've got it's just gone half past, but just one more mitzvah from the Parsha. Famously, in this week we have lots of Ashel Gedi B'Chalei B'Mo. You should not cook a kid in its mother's milk, which always raises a lot of questions. What does that mean? This is repeated 3 times in the Torah, and we understand each one is for a different prohibition. One is not cooking them together, meat and milk. One is not to actually eat the mixture once it's cooked, and one is also to not have any benefit from meat and milk that's cooked together. That's all from the Torah, but from a rabbinical level, we also, as we know, we separate between meat and milk of different dishes, but really meat and milk together, cold, wouldn't be a problem. Even meat, let's say you had meat from beef and you cooked it in milk, but the milk was from a camel or from a not a kosher animal. That mixture you could have benefit from because it's not meat and milk in the classic sense, or pig milk cooked with beef. Is that what I just said? Or even an undomesticated animal. The reason it says gedi, a goat, teaches you it must be like a calm animal, not like a deer. Deer is undomesticated. I know no one really has pet goats, but they are a bit more. They are considered more domesticated than a gazelle or an ibex or those types of animals. So if the animal is undomesticated, it's wild, and you cook that meat with milk, is not actually under the classic prohibition of meat and milk because the meat there in that case is not in the same category as domesticated. If it was, does that make sense? I don't know. You have you have a few categories. It has to be kosher and it has to be domesticated, the meat and the milk. For you to mix those together and cook it, then you've violated that mitzvah. But if either the animal isn't domesticated or it's from a non-kosher animal, then if they're mixed together, it wouldn't be a problem. So a Jew could own a franchise of Five Guys. Is that a pizza place? Is that what it's called? Or Domino's? If that's pepperoni, isn't it? Pepperoni, not from a kosher animal. Even if the cheese was cheese from a cow, from milk, that wouldn't be meat and milk because the meat isn't from a kosher animal. Even if when I say kosher, even though it's might not be shechted correctly, but if the actual animal itself is from a kosher type, then that is required, and the milk also needs to come from a kosher animal. And then if they're mixed together and both from domesticated animals, there's quite a few steps in it. That's why this odd expression is used. You shouldn't cook a kid, a gedi, which is kosher. So any kosher meat and domesticated in its mother's milk. Also, the milk needs to come from a kosher animal and also domesticated. Then you satisfy all the criteria for meat and milk. Then that would be a problem to cook it together and then to eat that mixture and then to have any benefit from it. But if one of those are missing, then you could actually have benefit from it. Obviously, you can't eat it because it would still be not kosher if you're mixing meat and milk. Does that last point make sense? I feel like you must have a question on that because it normally throws people off when I explain it to people.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. I was actually gonna ask the silly question that you clarified at the end, which is, if the if one or the other is not true, then could you still eat it? But you can't because it doesn't matter whether it's from kosher or non-kosher. If it's milk and meat, you can't eat it.
Yeah,
But
that's
you
right.
can have benefit if it's not from a kosher animal. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, the benefit is it's the key bit. Yeah, eating it's always going to be off the table. Um, but cooking it together, I
But
mean, you could.
presumably we can eat. Sorry, presumably we can eat meat cooked in oat milk because it's not milk,
That's right. Yeah, almond milk.
almond
Yeah,
milk, whatever. Yeah.
yeah. So say it like after a fleishik meal. Yeah.
Hmm. But
Uh,
Rabbi, isn't this super hypothetical now? Because you're saying if you cook something in milk that you can't eat anyway, you can't eat it. Yeah.
It would only be the question of the benefit afterwards. So if you owned a non-kosher restaurant,
Right.
then
Okay.
you'd have to say, well, is it is it a problem of kosher meat? Okay, so we've got to avoid cooking it now with kosher milk, but cook it with non-kosher milk. I mean, milk from a non-kosher animal, or cook the kosher milk with meat from a non-kosher animal. Then we avoid the problem. Obviously, eating it yourself is never going to be an option, but the benefit of it, if you can have benefit from it, that means you can then sell it to non-Jews. Yeah.
So are we effectively saying Jews should never run a non-kosher restaurant? Really?
If the meat is kosher and the milk is, if the meat and the milk are both from kosher animals, then they can't. But if one of them is not, then they could.
So if you sell treif to non-Jews, that's fine.
Yeah, you could even cook the treif with milk, assuming that the like horse meat, yeah, but not beef with milk from a cow would be a problem because then you've ticked both.
Only
But
if
it
it's been
was
shechted properly.
well, the chef thing is irrelevant to this question.
Okay.
It's still from a kosher species. Yeah.
Okay.
But a deer meat, let's say you manage to get gazelle, so it's kosher, but it's not a domesticated animal. It's wild. So that again would exempt you from the meat and milk. But no one's opening a chain of of that.
And they're expensive. It's too dear. Yeah.
Too dear, but bum. And finally, the I keep saying finally, the four death penalties are enumerated. Stoning, Srafer, where they would pour molten lead down a person, decapitation, and strangulation. Sounds horrific. Sounds a bit like ISIS. But I must point out that it's almost impossible to ever um, carry out the death penalty as capital punishment according to Jewish law, because you needed two male witnesses, unrelated to each other and unrelated to the perpetrator. Um, Also, they were interrogated individually on what time it was, where it happened, location, and then they would ask them questions about what was the color of the tree in the background, what was the color of the person, the murderer. Even though those questions were, if they got that, if they said they didn't know, that would be okay. But they would ask them lots of extra questions, hoping that they might try and half guess one of the questions, and then when they compare the notes with the other witness, when they cross-examine, they'll see that if anything was incorrect, there will be a problem. Also, you only needed one. The Court of 23 was a court that dealt with capital cases. So you needed a majority of only one to acquit. So 23, if it was 12 and 11, 12 said not guilty, 11 said guilty, that's fine. He would be free. But if it was the other way around, if it was to convict, you needed a majority of two. It would have to be 13-10. That would be a majority of three, or 13-11. I believe that's more than 24. Yeah. You needed a majority of two to convict, but only one to acquit, majority of one to acquit. And let's say they were almost finished, they already gave the sentence, and then someone said, I have more evidence to exonerate this man, they would start the case over. But if someone came and said, after they said he's innocent, someone came along and said, I have evidence to say he's guilty, they would ignore him. So it was very, very lopsided in the favor of the defendants. And according to the Gemara, only once in 7 years did they ever administer capital punishment. Another opinion says once in 70 years. And even then, that was considered a bloodthirsty basting. So it was very, very difficult. And ironically, if every judge said a person was guilty, he would also walk free, because the idea is there should be at least one of the judges that had some mitigating circumstances or some evidence to suggest that maybe he wasn't guilty. If they were all so like-minded, it's probably they all had it in for him. So
Sorry,
ironically, they all said innocent, he would walk free.
Rabbi,
Which is,
sorry, is this only if you're trying somebody for murder or something of that degree?
yes, capital cases, yeah.
Capital cases, okay. Right.
Yeah, yeah, but for everything else, it would just be a simple majority. Normally they didn't need a court of 23. That was only for capital cases. That's why the court of 3 would be fine, like a regular base did. Right, this is meant to be half an hour. I've run over. Hopefully you learned something there. And don't get too bogged down in the meat and milk, but it's good to know if you want to open a franchise, what you need to do and avoid. Okay, thank you for joining.
Rabbi, great.
Rabbi,
Thanks,
Bye,
Rabbi.
bye.
Rabbi, you won't feel it rude if I don't watch and look after
Oh,
it.
thank you. Dama Ben Nasina. Thank you for posting that. Yeah, I remember the Nasina. Forgot his first name. Dama. Very good.
All right. Good night,
Okay.
Rabbi. Thank you.
Good night.
Right, thank you.
Bye.